Hi, everybody. Today's Saturday, January 24th, 2026, and our dear friends Larry Johnson and Colonel Wilkerson are here with us. Welcome back.
Good to be
Well,
with
we're glad I'm glad I'm where I am. At least you guys are in the snow belts wherever you are.
you. I feel like Leningrad is approaching.
Yeah.
Colonel, who is the most handsome, person here?
Well, unquestionably, you are.
The guy in Florida with that beautiful shirt on. Yeah. Let me start with, the military buildup here in the West Asia. And from what I'm hearing from the Iranian officials, and every time we're talking about what's going on in the West Asia, taking this seriously. They're saying that we are prepared. We are prepared. Every time I ask them, and here is what J.D. Vance said about this military buildup in the Middle East, in the West Asia, and what is the objective of that.
Well, obviously, the president has a lot of cards he can play. I'm not going to reveal exactly how he's going to play them. But look, I think we just want to make sure that we have options. We have a lot of forces in the region. We have people who could be endangered. Part of our entire alliance structure over there, where Saudi Arabia and these other countries invest a lot in the United States of America. We got to make sure, of course, that we have people over there to protect our assets that are in these parts of the world. And I think the president just wanted to make sure that if, God forbid, the Iranians did something very stupid, that we had the resources necessary to respond to.
So what is he talking about? I literally don't understand in what situation Iran would attack, or why do they need to attack anybody in the region. I'm talking about the Iranian government. Colonel,
Well,
let's start.
he's reinforcing, I think, in a dramatic sort of way, the fact that this administration wants the American people, and maybe they do feel it themselves. Maybe Vance feels it himself, but they certainly want the American people to think, or at least they're following, that Iran presents a threat to the United States, which they distinctly do not. So you got to keep this kind of chatter patter going all the time to convince the people that you want to vote for you that you indeed are up against a serious threat in Southwest Asia, which is poppycock. But when's the last time you checked the American people on their ability to discriminate, at least 60% of them, as to what is a real threat and what's a hype threat? So he's hyping the threat. But I also think there's something more nefarious here. Think back to previous operations with regard to Iran, both diplomatic and kinetic. I think we're building a scene that is, one, satisfying Bibi Netanyahu, at least in the interim, because he's had some problems, not least of which with the Great Dome over Israel. And he's had some other problems militarily that disturb him in terms of his ability to ride out an Iranian attack and indeed to mount his own attack either just before it or in the middle of it. And second, he's not totally sure that Donald Trump is committed to being with him shoulder to shoulder. I think he's got Turkey, strangely enough. I think he's got Jordan, lock, stock, and barrel. And he may have others, but I think he's most concerned about Donald Trump. And then the last point I'd make is that you've got to keep saying this sort of thing when I have seen a reasonable facsimile of the CONOPS, the concept of operations. And everything that's happening right now in terms of carrier deployment, in terms of fighter deployment, in terms of support aircraft and other things that are necessary for the United States to mount a fairly sizable strike in conjunction with Israel on Iran are going into place. So I got to conclude that this is a pressure thing as well, if it's not going to be executed. But I don't know that it's not going to be executed. And the other thing I don't know is whether or not Bibi hadn't pulled out the Trump card, which I'm told he pulled out before to get Trump to do the nuclear site bombing. And that is that he's threatening to use a nuclear weapon if Trump doesn't join him. So you got all those ingredients into what is increasingly, I think, indicative to everyone in the world and more Americans fundamentally unpredictable and maybe even incompetent in many ways administration, led by a man who's losing it mentally. So a mess, a complete mess as far as I'm concerned. And I don't know how to read it in terms, is it going to happen? And is it going to happen in the next 72 hours?
Larry, how do you see the situation in West Asia and around Europe?
Well, let me step back, and I think the key to this is the control that the Zionists have over Donald Trump. And this may seem like a diversion from what we're talking about, but I do think it's relevant. Look who went to the Kremlin yesterday to meet with President Putin. Steve Witkoff, a Jewish Zionist. Jared Kushner, a Jewish Zionist. And I forget the name of the third guy that went along, but he was like a 36-year-old Jewish Zionist who's Trump's gatekeeper, chief of staff, who's controlling access. Well, she's not Jewish, to my knowledge, but Susie Wiles, she ran Bibi Netanyahu's presidential campaign. She's a Zionist. So you've got this enormous Zionist influence. And then we heard this guy with Lazar, again, another Jewish Zionist, talk about what he's hearing from his inside sources is like within the next 72 hours, there are going to be strikes. And to that point, I'm part of a weekly call, and there is a very prominent Zionist on that call who also happens to be Jewish, and he just wrote the same thing the other day. So there is this, there's enormous pressure on the part of Israel, despite the nonsense being put out that Israel, we're calling Trump off, we don't do it. Nonsense. This is being done really at the behest, encouragement of the Israelis. The big difference is that this time Iran's prepared. Iran didn't do the same stupid stuff it did prior to January 13th, when it rejected offers of military assistance from both China and Russia. So, the problem I see is that it's like if you've cocked a gun and you're ready to shoot it, it's not impossible, but it is difficult to decock. And they're building up all this. They're deploying these military assets, and the other thing though that factors in here is we now have firm, unvarnished evidence that the CIA is lying its ass off to Donald Trump. There may be some things that Trump says and does that really aren't his fault, because he's being told this by the CIA, by John Ratcliffe. And I based that on this article that came out earlier this week on Substack by Seymour Hersh, where he was writing about the war in the situation in Russia, in the war in Ukraine, but he was citing an official that from the intelligence community. And I mean, this guy told Hersh, and Hersh wrote it down like, some happy scribe, that last weekend, the internet and cell phone service was shut down in Russia. I mean, it was a demonstrable lie. But my point is that when you've got the intelligence community telling you certain things like, "Oh yeah, Mr. President, if you hit Iran with 300 Tomahawk cruise missiles, they'll collapse. They won't be able to withstand it." Then he might think, "Well, I've got a chance. We can do this." So that's why I say it's so dangerous.
Let me just add to that, Nima, that I think we're also looking at a refreshed and even deepened Epstein situation. And I don't discount for a moment that Trump will use something like this, even just the brouhaha over a potential attack, a deployment, but certainly an attack which is going to go south really rapidly to deflect attention from Epstein. It's getting serious in the bowels of the Congress. And you've even got Republicans you wouldn't think would be interested in more revelations interested.
Carl, the question is that if the United States attacks, as Larry just mentioned, that 300, 400 Tomahawk missiles being used, and what would be the repercussions for midterm elections for Donald Trump, which we know he's so much concerned about midterm elections?
If I'm right about the CONOPS, the concept of operations, they are attempting to achieve, let's call it a pincer movement, if you will. They would come into the Eastern Med with the one carrier. They would sneak up in the North Arabian Sea and into the Sea of Oman with the other carrier, Lincoln. And all the assets on those carriers would be generated. And with two carriers positioned that way and with logistics support from people like Jordan and Turkey, they could mount round the clock operations. It usually takes three carriers to do that. Given that they'd be feeding aircraft in from Al Udeid and other places too, they could do that. It's not 300 cruise missiles. It's thousands of bombs that are going to be dropped. It might be even a quarter to half of the bombs in the U.S. inventory. And we got plenty of bombs. There's no question about that. Question is, can we make new ones? That's the real problem. But we got plenty right now. We got plenty of aircraft. So yeah, it could be a mess. I don't think by any stretch of the imagination we're going to get what we would expect from it, a cowed Iran and a regime change. What we're going to get is a destroyed Israel. I almost want to say bring it on in that regard. But it's a lot more than just 300 cruise missiles that this armada, if it were put into action, could send into Iran.
Yeah, Larry, your take on the military buildup and how, because Carl just mentioned that they can really increase the amount of ammunition and the amount of bombs they have in the region, and
Well,
how do you think that the this board of peace that Donald Trump has created, somehow the
yeah.
new
Okay.
UN,
Don't get me started on that. My God, you're going to get my blood pressure. I mean, where's my blood pressure medicine?
And the latest word from Netanyahu was, I think the quote was something like, phase two? There's no phase two. I don't give a damn. He's going to go on killing Gazans.
Yeah. Look, let's start with a benchmark. 2003, the attack on Iraq. The United States had uncontested control of the air, complete air supremacy. That means we could fly anywhere we wanted. We didn't have to worry about getting shot down. We had the luxury of being able to target whatever we wanted. And how did that work out? It did not force Saddam out of a leadership position. We had to put people in on the ground. And in this case, again, we're flying around a country in Iraq that's 1/4 the size of Iran. We've seen the limitations of U.S. military air power in the Red Sea during the earlier part of this year of 2025, from January, February through March, when Trump launched the continuation of the Biden operation to open the Red Sea. The U.S. again completely failed. So that's why I said we get these armchair warriors that have played too many video games, and they don't understand time and distance. They don't understand fortifications. Iran has not been stacking its ballistic missiles above ground. They've been building and storing them in secure underground facilities that are very difficult to destroy, but more importantly, difficult for the United States to target. And what's changed is Iran now has ample air defense systems it did not have in June. I'd assumed they had them in June, but they didn't. Turned out the only S-400 that was deployed in Iran in June of 2025 was at a nuclear power plant down in the southwest corner of Iran where Russians were working. So, they had themselves protected, and that site didn't get hit. So, um, if an attack is launched on Iran, Iran's going to retaliate immediately. So, kiss off Al Udeid Air Force Base. It'll be destroyed, as well as the air base in Saudi Arabia, where the United States has based fighters. uh, I think Iran will move immediately to shut the Strait of Hormuz, which then cuts off 45% of the world's oil consumption right away. That is, so once that's closed down, it'll take 2 or 3 days, but the world economy will begin grinding to a halt. And then, as Colonel Wilkerson noted, Israel's going to get clobbered. Now, I've got one friend who's still an Air Force officer who said, "Oh, well, we've got the capability to stop Iran's missiles." And I just wrote back and said, "Oh, yeah, well, then why didn't we do that in June? Because we had all these air defense systems. We're relying on THAAD and Patriots that have been about everything the U.S. has left in its inventory has been sent there, and those are completely ineffective against these the hypersonic missiles that Iran does have. I mean, it's demonstrated. We've seen it. Some people say, "Oh no, they don't have it." I don't care what you call it. When you see a missile traveling down at this, this angle, and then it diverts, that that's an advanced technology right there. So, just because what's circulating within the Zionist circles is, yeah, we're going to do this, and I don't know if that's just feeding them a false hope, or if they're getting legitimate information, but we certainly are putting military assets into the region that are capable of doing that. But again, I don't think we've thought through the consequences that if we do that, this is going to be different this time. And the United States is going to suffer significant damage that it did not suffer during the 12-day war.
I would just add to that, Neiman, that comparing Iraq and 80% dumb World War II bombs and what would happen now really isn't a good comparison. Bill Clinton in 4 days did more damage to Iraq than we did in all the preparatory bombing in Desert Shield, Desert Storm, because they were 99% PGMs. Much different. I'm not trying to argue with Larry. I'm just saying that the devastation that we can produce is going to be far in excess of what we did in Iraq from the air. I mean, that said, I think Larry's absolutely right about the correlation of forces as it lines up right now. I think we're going to go into a buzzsaw, and I think it's going to be devastating. But I don't want to discount the devastation that's going to be inflicted on the place where you're located right now.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree with that. But I think there is a tendency in the U.S. part to overestimate its ability to fight uncontested.
Especially from the air.
Yeah.
Especially from the air.
I think this time around, Iran is fully prepared for any attack. That's why, with the case of, for example, during these sort of manipulated, riots here in Iran, we've seen that how Iranian were capable of shutting down Starlink, which wasn't, nobody has done that before. And somehow when you look at the mainstream media outside, you see how they're simplifying everything of what's going on, the capabilities of the Iranian army, the capabilities of the Iranian, the soft, the hard power of Iranian army. They somehow trying to simplify that for the president of the United States. Larry just mentioned, Colonel, how CIA is capable of manipulating Donald Trump. And Donald Trump has no clue about these things. He just listens and he believes whatever he receives from these sources.
I don't know if that's the case. I think if it's Laura Loomer or his chief of staff delivering something to him, give it some consideration. But I'm not sure he gives Ratcliffe or Tulsi Gabbard or anybody else in the intel community a whole lot of shrift. There's no question that Ratcliffe is working for Bibi Netanyahu in my mind. I mean, he might as well transfer his flag to Jerusalem or to Tel Aviv, whichever, and work for Bibi directly. And there's no doubt in my mind that the CIA is cooking up some stuff that is not true, just like they did when we were getting ready to go to the UN to give the presentation in 2003. They do that very well. Making up intelligence to conform with policy needs is what I call it, but it might even be worse than that now. That said, I think Trump has stumbled onto a strategy that he tried to articulate in Davos, but did a very poor job of doing. Maybe he did that intentionally. I don't know. I think his dementia's increasing every day. Maybe even that's a disguise, though. I don't know. I don't think it is. I think it is real dementia that's occurring. And we're going to have to do something about that. And the thing to do about that, of course, you're not going to get the 25th Amendment to do that because people are never going to surrender their power. You're going to have to impeach him. You're going to have to start a reasonably sound and sane, with Republican participation, movement in the Congress to remove him from office, the first president in our history to be removed from office by impeachment. Nixon was removed by impeachment indirectly because he saw the articles and said, I'd rather resign than be actually the first president to be removed from office through impeachment. That's an absolute essential thing if we are going to get some kind of government on an even keel again, both domestically and internationally. I believe that in my soul. Whether we have the Congress that's sufficiently courageous to do that or not is another matter. All to say that the strategy Trump seems to be implementing has one purpose overall, and that's to make money for Trump and his family. And Larry's absolutely right about these guys being in Russia. They're emissaries for that movement. The fact that he hasn't, as far as I can tell, made any substantial arrangement with Putin or overture to Putin about the gentleman's agreement that Putin has spoken about to continue beyond February the 26th, I think it is, that New START goes out, is just preposterous. We're looking at the most dangerous component of the world right now in nuclear weapons and no treaties, and Trump doesn't want to do anything about it. This is in order to destabilize even further a world that he has succeeded in, thank you very much, destabilizing quite a bit already. Because again, he thinks through his skills expressed in incredible terms, I have no authority over me. Only my morality is the authority over me. He thinks he can sit atop this chaotic world that he's by purpose creating. And so anything that happens now that's out of the ordinary is consonant with that strategy. And that is a hell of an admission if it's true.
Larry, it seems that the main concept goes to the board of peace. He wants to create something similar to UN, and he wants to run it. He wants to receive money from various sources, and he wants to have the money to spend it and to keep it. I don't know.
Well,
How do you find it?
this goes back to what Colonel Wilkerson was talking about in terms of impeaching Donald Trump or having him removed under the 25th Amendment. Uh, one of the signs of dementia is something called confabulation. Confabulation is an example with Donald Trump is when he insists that he has brought peace to 8 different wars. He hasn't. I mean, objectively, is not the case. But he really believes that he did what he said he's doing. And so that's one of the early signs of dementia, when you've got this, you take a fantasy and make it your reality. So Trump, we start with a Trump who's mentally impaired and surrounded with people who are continuing to uphold that deterioration or allow it to go on. But we shouldn't be surprised. We saw it under Joe Biden too. Joe Biden's staffers did it,
Yep.
just like it's been done with Trump. Yeah, and this in terms of actual actions, Trump's bombed in Nigeria. He's bombed in Syria. He's bombed in Iran. He's got more bombings than actual peace initiatives. Uh, and yet, again, you see this obsession with getting the Nobel Peace Prize, and you have to say, what's wrong with you? I mean, I have never run into a person that is obsessed with getting that kind of recognition and acknowledgement for something he hasn't done. I mean, it's not normal, for God's sake. And everybody's just sort of sitting around acting like it is normal. So, um, the problem is that Trump is still something of a decision maker within his administration, but he's really not in control of it. He's being told certain things to do. Where that request originates from, I often don't know. I mean, let's take, when he brought Azerbaijan and Armenia to Washington D.C. to sign an agreement. And now, to this day, Trump can still not say Azerbaijan correctly. Even there at Davos, he was calling it Azerbaijan. And he also had him settling an agreement with Albania. And Albania is going, "Are we at war with a? Well, find out where Azerbaijan is, and let's find out if we're at war with them." I mean, this is theater of the absurd. So, um, I'm extremely concerned that a lot of the decisions that are being made for, as Colonel Wilkerson indicated, financial interests. I mean, let's take Venezuela as a case in point. We've been given a variety of reasons for why we had to go to, take out Maduro. Oh, he's a drug kingpin, and the fentanyl is flowing out of Venezuela. Yet, go to the State Department's INCSA report, the report on international narcotics control strategy. 99% of the fentanyl that's been seized coming in the United States comes out of Mexico. 1% comes out of Canada. 0% out of Venezuela. So, the drugs is not the real issue. Oh, the oil. We got to get control of the oil. Okay. Venezuela produces 700,000 barrels of oil per day. That represents less than 2% of global oil production. The problem is that oil, it's one thing like if you got a cup of coffee and you put a straw in and you suck the coffee out, no problem. Put peanut butter in that coffee cup and then try to suck it out. Very, very difficult. That oil that is in Venezuela is very thick. It's like peanut butter. And so once you get it out, you have to refine it. And it can't just be sent to any regular refinery. It has to go to a specialized refinery. Huh. I wonder where you'd find those. Oh my God, there are 3 of them along the Gulf Coast of Mexico, or in the Gulf of America. My bad. That are owned by a billionaire named Paul Singer, who happens to be a significant financial contributor to Donald Trump's campaign. And guess what? Every barrel of oil processed requires an additional $20. So, like the Permian oil that comes out of Texas, if that comes out of the ground at $40 a barrel, that's the cost. Whereas Venezuela, it takes $40 to get it out of the ground. Then you got to do another $20 just to get it so it can be sent to the world market. So it's more costly. But Mr. Singer is banging the cash register every time because when you got 700,000 barrels of oil per day, and all of that needs to be refined. Just multiply that times 20. So you're looking at $15 million a day. Gee, $15 million a day over 10 days is $150 million. And that 150 million over another, so just do the math. You're talking $1 billion or more. So is that why Trump actually did Venezuela? To enrich his friend? And maybe Mr. Singer is going to give one of Donald Trump's boys a taste of the action? That seems more likely to me than anything else.
Yeah. Carl, when you see Europeans from the mindset of let's support the US hegemony or the Western hegemony in Ukraine, because if we lose in Ukraine, that would send a bad message to China, that would break the, somehow destroy the Western hegemony. From that moment coming to what's going on right now with the case of Greenland, they're trying so hard to convince the Trump administration not to capture Greenland. On the other hand, you see the Canadian Prime Minister saying that the rules-based international order, he's a banker, he knows what he's talking, is over. What is happening in the mind of those Europeans and together with Canada? Are they really feeling that some sort of sea changes are happening?
How could you not if you were an observer of the world scene? It's happening without Donald Trump. It's happening because, as I've said many times before, and I will keep saying, the power is moving out of the West and going to the East. And it's a dramatic transition. There's a briefing making its way around the internet right now. Well, there's actually two. There's one by a 95-year-old Singaporean who is probably one of the leading experts on China in the world. And there's another one that is strictly economic in the way it's presented. And they throw up on the screen, and I think it's fairly accurate, about 100 different parameters of everything from technology to farming to you name it, plastics, you name it, and who's in the lead and who's got more in terms of potential for the future. It's China in almost 70% of those areas, and some of them are pretty crucial. It is also quite clear to Carney and people like him who watch the world he's a businessman, really. He's not a Trudeau type. He's a businessman. When they look at the world, they see this power seepage. And what's happening is the United States is very incoherently, in my view, trying with this kind of Hobbesian strategy, which I've called it, to deflect that, arrest it, stop it, whatever. A lot of Venezuela's motivation, for example, was to teach other South American leaders what we can do to them, because China is stealing a march on us in South America, hugely so. 60% of the commerce with most of the major nations in South America, including your own, is with China, not with the United States. That's a huge 15, 20-year flip over. And that's taking place almost everywhere in the world, as this 95-year-old Singaporean was pointing out. And we don't like it. We don't like it at all. And so far, our way of dealing with it, and I even saw this in the second Obama administration, I saw a little bit of it in the Bush administration, has been sanctions and military, and trying to create the kind of chaos that we think will arrest that movement of power. We're wrong. It's not going to do it. And we want to suck China into that contest in a kinetic sort of way. And we're not going to do that either, because China is not going to do itself in. They're going to stand aside and let us kill ourselves. And thank you very much. We're doing a pretty good job of that. Carney recognizes that, and I think is trying to set trying to set Canada up for an alternative world that he knows is inevitably coming. And this gave him an opportunity to do it rather dramatically because of Trump's incompetence in dealing with that very world. I don't think for a moment that Carney likes what he's doing or enjoys what he's doing or feels like that, it's not some real rupture with the past. It is. But he understands that it's got to happen in order to accommodate himself with the growing power of China and China's allies. And we're talking about probably 60% of the world's GDP huddled around that group, if not more. Think back to 1945 when we had 51% of the GDP and the rest of the world was prostrate at our feet. We're never going back there. We are never going back there. And in fact, we're going far away from that. And China's taking over. And that makes a lot of people in this country, especially a lot of these billionaires who are in the shadows behind Trump, really angry. They want to do something about it. And from time to time, they want to do something kinetic about it. And things like Iran and Venezuela and so forth are aimed as much at China and saying, get out of here, as they are aimed at any specific reason involving that country, other than, as Larry's absolutely right, enriching Trump and his cronies like Singer and like others too, who are into making diesel out of heavy crude oil.
Well, yeah. I mean, just let me expand a little bit on this. The people in the United States that are, getting all alarmed about this threat from China, they remind me of the guy that moved to Minnesota and wakes up in December and sees that there's snow on the ground and is shocked that there's snow on the ground. Oh my God, where did the snow come from? That's what you get in Minnesota in winter. The Chinese, in terms of their economic involvement in Central and South America, for God's sake, this hasn't been a damn secret. They've been doing it, 30 years with my personal experience. I mean, I did a lot of when we set up Berg Associates in 1998. We did a lot of product counterfeiting investigations in the Cologne Free Trade Zone in Panama. For God's sakes, the Chinese were everywhere. The Chinese were managing, there are 3 major container ports that move an enormous volume of product that's at the north end of the Panama Canal in Cologne. The Chinese owned those and managed it, had been doing so. And then, the casinos, I did some compliance work for a couple of the casinos, to try to sort out money laundering threats. They're filled primarily with Chinese gamblers. So my point here is that the West is pretending, though, God, we got to stop China. They're spreading. They've been there. They've been doing this. And so you got to step back and say, why is it that we're now all of a sudden so obsessed with this? I mean, what's changed? And what I see that's changed is that America, through its own self-inflicted wounds, by destroying its own industrial base, while China has happily gone on building up its industrial base, that we're mad at them for doing what we've been unable to do, or for us doing the opposite of what they've done. And our attitude, though, is instead of, because remember, part of what is happening in China is happening because of our opening to China back under Nixon, and that they've responded to that by turning from a strict agrarian communist state to, we like to say that they're a communist state, but by God, if that's communism, then it puts capitalism to shame. They are commercially savvy and incredibly productive. And so instead of us embracing them, saying, hey, we're glad that we could help you become what you are, and finding a way to have a partnership with them, to work with them in some sort of collaborative fashion, all we can do is demonize the hell out of them, convince ourselves that they're a damn enemy that we've got to stop, we've got to destroy, we've got to go to war with them. Because you hear that rhetoric coming out of the deputy commander at Indo-PACOM, what used to be called PACOM. And then when the Chinese react to our threats, we act surprised. I think we've lost our damn minds.
I would agree.
Yeah.
And this 95-year-old Singaporean, I recommend it to anybody who wants to watch it. It's on YouTube. Deng Xiaoping essentially articulated exactly what Larry just described way back there when. And no expectation, I'm sure, on his part that he would be so singularly successful in using us to kill ourselves. But that's essentially what we've done. A lot of this economic change is happening because we made so many errors, not least of which was our companies evacuating the country and going to China. And what Larry's talking about in terms of comedy collaboration and cooperation and so forth was the reason the president I served allowed Colin Powell, as his Secretary of State, to have one portfolio that he could operate in despite Cheney and despite Rumsfeld with regard to the WTO and membership therein for China, which now Republicans are excoriating us for having done because we gave China, well, I'm sorry, were you looking at the world? Did you understand what was happening? Why didn't you do something domestically to restrict this industry from moving so wholesalely to China and taking the jobs with it and so forth? This is as much our fault as it is China's artistry or China's strategy or China's competence. And, now we're reacting because, man, it's gotten out of hand. And it is out of hand in some respects. But there's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing you can do about it. But I think Larry's right. You need, because of two things primarily, a lot of other things too, nuclear weapons, and the need, as Putin has talked about again and again, to get a treaty regime again and to put some curbs on these things before they bankrupt us all, including Xi Jinping, and the climate crisis. We're not doing much on it, and Trump is and this is inexplicable to me, other than the man doesn't like anything that doesn't correspond with his morality. The climate crisis is going to eat our lunch, and it's going to start eating our lunch more and more every freaking year that goes by until the end of the century, when it's going to be too late to do anything, and we're all hovering somewhere trying to figure out what to do when the new technology hasn't put us on Mars or something like that. The situation in 1991-92 was, let's build a world that we all can cooperate and collaborate in because we have these challenges, not least of which was nuclear weapons. Then we got a series of presidents who didn't know what they were doing and corresponded mostly to the interests that we're seeing behind Trump right now and made a mess of things. And then along comes Trump to kind of put the chapeau on that mess. And that's essentially what he's doing. We have messed the world up ourselves, particularly from George H.W. Bush's defeat at the hands of Israel, mind you, and the presidents that came along after him who were inexperienced and in some cases grossly inexperienced and listened to these people and did their bidding. Everything from the clean break strategy to what Trump is doing now with Israel, which is just unconscionable for one leader of one country to do with another leader of another country. Absolute George Washington rolling in his grave, spinning in his grave over it. That's where we are. Regardless of who is the giant in the world, we aren't anymore. And we're angry about it.
Yeah.
What else motivates people like J.D. Vance and others around Trump who might have a brain, but are more or less in cooperation with him in his idiocy?
Yeah. Here is, Larry, what J.D. Vance said about the main goal, the main objective in Greenland.
Simple fact is, Greenland matters to American national security because our entire missile defense relies on security in the Arctic. This is something the media who's obsessed with Greenland, they completely forget why Greenland matters. What if, God forbid, I'm not saying it's going to happen anytime soon, but what if a foreign country launched a missile at the United States of America? We would need control over the Arctic in order to shoot that missile down. Our entire missile defense system depends on that Arctic security. Meanwhile, the Chinese and the Russians and even the Danes who control Greenland admit that they want to control that facility. They want to control that island, that landmass. That would make us weaker. That would make our country more endangered. That would mean that if the president is negotiating with a foreign leader, he would have less leverage because they would be able to realistically threaten the sovereignty and the territorial safety of the United States of America. We're not going to let that happen.
Yeah.
Bullshit.
Yeah. I've lost all respect for J.D. Vance. I mean, what he said there is just a lie, one lie after another. So again, let's go back and look at the history of the last 75 years. The United States has signed an agreement of, I don't know what to call it, mutual defense or whatever, with Greenland/Denmark. But essentially, Greenland was always seen as following under the security umbrella of NATO. And during that entire period, there was never a single time that we asked to do something or, deploy forces or build up a base that Greenland or the Denmark told us to go pound sand and told us no. No, just the opposite. So then you step back and you have to ask the question, why the sudden obsession? Now, the notion that Russia wants to take Greenland and that's a priority for them. Why? Right now, because of the size, the landmass of Russia, they surround 53% of the Arctic Circle, with Canada having about another 40%, and then the rest taken up with ocean. So the notion that Russia needs Greenland to, quote, control the Arctic, that's just a lie. Number one, but number two, how do you control the Arctic? We say these words. What does that mean? Does that mean you can sail around it, sail through it, that you can deploy personnel there? Well, guess what? The United States can't. We've got one icebreaker. We actually have two, but one's broken. So we got one. And we've got Norway's building us another one that's supposed to be ready in 2 years. And then we got 5 or 6 more on order that probably won't show up until 4 or 5 years from now. How about Russia? Well, Russia's got 40 icebreakers. 10 of them are nuclear powered. So we're not even technologically in the game. And yet here we are and trying to pick a fight with Greenland and with Denmark for what purpose? Because there is no exigency out there right now. Now, China's not threatening to take it over. We continue this lie, gaslighting the American public that, Iran is a threat. Iran's a terrorist threat. We got to stop them. Russia's a threat. They're coming after us. They're expansive. China's a threat. And yet, take those 3 countries, total up their total number of military bases overseas. Total up the number of times they have attacked other countries, killed people, citizens of other countries. And you know what? The only country that stands atop that list is not China, is not Russia, is not Iran. It's the United States. If we follow Bibi Netanyahu's definition of terrorism, which I endorse, he presented it on Bill Buckley's show, Crossfire, but it was back in 1987. And the definition was very simple, elegant: the use of violence against civilians for political purposes.
Mm-hmm.
With that as a definition of terrorism, the number one terrorist country in the world, by definition, is the United States. Indisputable. At a minimum, we contributed to the deaths of 500,000 Iranians during the Iran-Iraq War because of our support for Saddam Hussein and providing the precursor chemicals that were used to make mustard gas that was used against the Iranians. It's not Russia that invaded Afghanistan or Iraq twice. So, and frankly, it's not Russia that started the civil war in Syria. We did that. We've got a legion, buckets of blood on our hands, and we spend all of our time demonizing these other countries, claiming that they represent some enormous threat to us, when in fact we're the biggest threat to us, not them.
I would add that we're the only country in the world that has the degree of sanctions on other countries that we have,
Yeah,
which are in some cases more deadly to the people of that country, not necessarily their leaders, but the people of that country, than bombs. And the second greatest terrorist in the world is Bibi Netanyahu and Israel. If you saw what Francesca Albanese released recently, and I think she's right, I think the total of people that are going to be under that beautiful city that Trump is going to build, underneath the concrete, is closer to 300 or 400,000, 75% of whom are women and children, than it is to the Hamas Health Ministry's numbers, which are preposterous.
yeah.
Carl, what is the objective if what JD Vance just said is not the case? What is the objective in Greenland? Because
I know.
Denmark is,
How about our ambassador in Denmark? The man Donald Trump sent to represent the United States in Denmark. Look at his comments. He's a billionaire. I can't remember his name right now. I hope I never hear his name again, but he covets. Look at what he said. He covets the minerals underneath the ice cap on Greenland, and he'll delineate them for you. And supposedly, one of the first things he said when presenting his credentials to the people in Denmark was, "We want Greenland, and we will have it." This is Trump's ambassador.
Yeah, his name, I guess, is Ken Howery. Just looked
Yeah,
it up.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and well, that's the other thing that we keep hearing. We go to Venezuela ostensibly because they got rare earth minerals. We go to Greenland because they got rare earth minerals. We got rare earth minerals here in the United States.
hmm
I mean, there's just north of me, 30-minute drive. You can go to the Mosaic mine. It's one of these huge mining companies in the United States, and they dug out all the gypsum, and then the tailings, what the leftovers of what they dig out, they pile up. Those piles contain rare earth minerals. We've got them. The problem is not the raw rare earth minerals; it's having it processed. And there's only one country in the world set up to do industrial level processing of that material, and that is China. That's why China has the monopoly on rare earth minerals. Not that rare earth minerals are actually so rare, they're only found in certain locations. They're actually pretty plentiful,
yep.
but it's the processing, for God's sake. And they don't, nobody seems, our US policymakers just don't seem to capture that.
And one of the things Australia is laboring with right now is our pressure to try to get them, because they were a big rare earth metal processor. Then China pretty much put them out of business because their costs were so cheap in China to do it. And another plan of Deng Xiaoping, he said, quote, "We will have 95% of the market in 20 years." They put Australia out of business, essentially. And we've been putting pressure on them to try and get them to resurrect their processing facilities, which are lying latent, but it would be very costly. While we're not doing it, as Larry just indicated.
Yeah.
Screw your ally.
Larry, I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in Syria, because the two forces that are somehow supported by the Trump administration, the Kurds and the current government in Syria, the current, the HTS government in Syria, they have released, because of this sort of struggle, this sort of, confrontation you see in Syria, they have released ISIS forces, which we know is of greatest concern, is of particular concern in that region. Even Iraq said send them over to the prisons in Iraq just to avoid any sort of chaos because of these people. These are not ordinary people, these are hugely dangerous people. And we know how much all the countries in the region try to put these people in prison. And what is happening? What is the Trump administration? What do they want to do to just avoid that happening again?
I don't think they know. And
Yeah.
I doubt that they seriously have a plan and have thought this through. I mean, the contradictions in this are just incredible. And now, for starters, how could you claim that ISIS is up and operating? Didn't it? Donald Trump destroyed them. Nima, why do you hate America?
The CIA is probably keeping them in a lodge somewhere so they can call them out when they need them.
Yeah. And in any event, we appointed one of the ISIS terrorists. Well, he used to be part of ISIS, but then he evolved into other terrorist organizations. He's now the president of Syria. So, and they're too busy killing Christians and Alawites. And then here is, longstanding support to the Kurds. I, you know, as I reflect on the last 100 years of U.S. involvement with foreign relations, uh, I view the United States as a malevolent, vicious, evil Lucy from the Charles Schultz cartoon strip Peanuts. This Lucy in that would always try to entice Charlie Brown to try to kick the football. She'd put the football, American football, out. Say, "Come on, Charlie, kick it." Charlie would run up and try to kick it. She'd pull it away. He'd, legs would fly up in the air and he'd fall on his ass. So time after time after time, we get these different ethnic groups. The Kurds, hey, trust us, man. Work with us. We'll help you. We'll protect your people. We'll ensure your interests are upheld. And then it would just fight this war for us. Go into Iran. Go see if you can kill some Iranians for us or whatever. And then when the blowback comes and they're getting killed and they come to us for help, we go, huh, who are you? I don't recall meeting you. We did it. We did it to the Hmong in Cambodia. We and in Laos. We had all these Asian groups that were supporting us in the Vietnam War. We screwed them over. I mean, that is, I'm waiting for someone to make what I'd call the truthful horror movie. And the horror movie would be this: instead of just the zombie apocalypse, it would be all of those people, those foreigners that have fought on behalf of what they thought was a U.S. cause, where the United States enticed them to take up arms, where the United States enticed them to go kill others, that they all rise up from the dead, unite, and come to attack us as payback. Because, what we're doing here in Syria, remember, now more than a year ago, they're celebrating, the Russia's been pushed out. Iran's taken a punch in the nose. We've got this thing under control. And today, the two sides the U.S. is supposedly supporting are killing each other, or in a full-fledged war. Turkey is struggling to have influence, and as is Israel. So the only thing we're good at is breaking things.
You can also throw into the pot of the people that should hate our guts, the Czechs and the Hungarians.
Yeah.
Carol, just to wrap up this session, I think one of the most important and most crucial questions right now in the mind of Europeans is how to deal with the Trump administration or whoever you may get JD Vance in, after Donald Trump. This sort of mindset in the United States that sees Europe as though they can sacrifice them to fight Russia, to fight China, to make them to improve the situation with the case of the power and the strength of the United States. Do you think that the reality is hitting Europe, or they're still so numb, they don't want to understand the reality of what's going on, because to be so much dependent on the United States is painful for them, as we see it right now.
The latter, I think, is the greatest sentiment. And the leadership that they have right now, almost across the board, but certainly in the principal countries, is just disconnected, in my view. NATO is gone. It's dead. It's a moribund alliance. The quickest thing, the best thing that the Europeans could do, this is going to sound a little radical, but I would do it where I, at the beginning again, when they had the steel and coal union and built the EU, I would turn the EU, I'd throw all the people in the EU right now out. I'd turn the EU, by consensus of the leadership, if you could get it, by force, if you couldn't, I'd throw the leadership out and I'd make that the chapeau of a European security identity. They're already a dictatorship, so let's give them a reason to be a dictatorship. Let's let them manage the development of, in lieu of NATO as a force for security, a European security identity. And let's let them work on, going to be very difficult because we've created such a mess with Ukraine. And I put much of the blame at our feet, but some theirs too. And the continuing blame almost dramatically at their feet, eventually to incorporate Russia. And I would start talks within a year or two, Putin and whomever's there as the leader. And I would try to make sure that we develop this architecture with Russia in mind. Maybe it might take 10 years to actually get it in there. But Europe needs to take over its own security. And it needs the prominent powers to be leaders in this, just as they were in the coal and steel union and in the movement to the EU, a common currency, and all the rest of the stuff. If they don't do that, we're going to see a Europe that falls back on itself and looks a lot more like the Europe of the 30s, if you will, with modern technology and so forth to enhance and deepen this profound shift, than it looks like anything else. And it will, in my view, be a tragedy.
Larry, your understanding on Europe before wrapping up.
Understanding of Europe?
Yeah.
Is that possible? I mean, it's it's crazy town. I thought we should also talk a little bit about the complete clown show at Davos.
Yeah.
So here you have Zelensky show up and basically yell at everybody. I mean, he was unhinged.
He's like a kid.
Yeah. Oh my God. So, and then out of that, Donald Trump meets with him and claims, "Oh yeah, he's secured an agreement from Zelensky to, make concessions on territory, like give up the Donbass." And then within the hour, Zelensky's basically saying, "Hell no, I didn't say that. That's crazy." So you have that. You have Europe being just completely humiliated by Donald Trump. I mean, the things that Trump and his team, Scott Bessent and Howard Lutnick, the Secretary of Commerce, Bessent, Secretary of Treasury, they were just, insulting to the Europeans. Not that they didn't deserve it. I mean, far be it to say that the Europeans were innocent here and undeserving of these insults. But what it exposed is that Europe is a vassal territory, that they are completely subjected to the U.S. dominance, and they don't have a shred of self-respect or the economic or military wherewithal to assert themselves. But it doesn't help that, as crazy as they are, that they're offset by a crazy guy in Washington, D.C. Again, Donald Trump, this lust to take over the Arctic on false premises, or to take over Greenland so we can secure the Arctic region. And you got to ask yourself, What the hell does that mean? Secure the Arctic region? We're going to what? Deploy a fleet of icebreakers we don't have to basically create a security perimeter and say you can't sail in here without our permission? That we're going to levy a claim is that we own the mineral rights to as particular parts of that territory where we don't have the actual military force we can deploy there to do that? And again, that instead of saying, can we approach the world in a way in which we work with the Chinese and Russians? What is there, if there's energy to be extracted from the Arctic, for what purpose? Is it to extract say oil so that we can make our certain companies and individuals wealthy? Or are we talking about extracting it so we can ensure that all countries have access to low cost energy so that they can devote their money to investing in people and building up infrastructure in their respective countries? What's our goal? Is our goal actually to make others better? Or is it our goal to basically subjugate others, use them for our own personal benefit without any regard for what happens to them? So this is this whole Davos meeting. It was I think it was a sign that this entire international economic order is coming unraveled, and the West is in sort of a desperate situation. They don't know what to do. They've been running the show, driving the bus, controlling things now for 70 plus years, and all of a sudden they no longer have control. And what Russia and China are doing together with under the rubric of BRICS is scaring the hell out of them.
And even let me get a word in on Scott Bessent here, because since Larry brought him up, I watched his interview, one of his interviews, and his dialogue, his almost looking down his nose answer about the beauty of U.S. sanctions was purely revolting. I mean, talking as if U.S. sanctions were the end all and be all of the world for every aspect of international relations. And the United States knew how to do it. And Scott Bessent was the greatest architect of them on the face of the earth. I mean, if I'd have been the interviewer, the follow ups would have been torturous for him. What a disgusting performance.
Yeah.
Secretary of the Treasury of the United States of America talking that way. Our sanctions are beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, he's another example of someone who's just completely out of touch with reality.
Yeah.
And that's what's so alarming about this whole Trump administration. I mean, it's one thing to focus on Donald Trump and say this is all about Donald Trump, but Trump's being enabled by an entire group of sycophants who are, telling him he's the greatest and he's the best and he's the smartest. And I can't blame for, you love it when people are giving you compliments, and then you refuse to stop looking at yourself objectively.
Nema's without comment.
Love it. Did you freeze up there, Nema? Oh, there he's back.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
You have
Thank
Nema,
you so much,
you have a
Carl Wilkerson and Larry Johnson.
you have a raid around you probably in Tehran. You're still in Tehran, right? Better leadership than is anywhere near me.
Yeah.
I'm 15 miles outside Washington.
So this is it, huh? You're telling us to shut up and go away? I'll take that as a yes.
Yeah. I have your voice choppy, somehow choppy. I can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Thank you, Carl and Larry, for being with us today. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You can hear me now?
Thank
Yeah.
you so much
I said that you just told
for
us to
being with
shut.
us today.
You just told us to shut up and go away. Can't hear us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye.
Bye bye. See you soon. Bye bye.